Many people assume that after D-Day or after at least the Battle of the Bulge, that it's kind of clear sailing from there. There are more than 10,000 American soldiers killed in action in April 1945 in Germany. It's more than any month other than the month of invasion, June 1944. It was awful virtually to the last gunshot. To think that somehow there's an inevitability to victory that includes an inevitability that all of those who are among the victors are going to survive is just wrong. There are a lot of dead boys between the end of the Battle of the Bulge in late January of 1945 and the German surrender officially on May 8th, 1945. German obstinance, German tactical capability, all of that plays out right through the spring, and it's really horrible. It's just a miserable period in the war. The Americans and the British and our other allies generally can't understand why the stupid bastards don't give up, because they are beaten. 50 German cities are being obliterated. Millions of Germans are dying. The Russians are on the outskirts of Berlin by January 1945. So the question that the Allies are asking themselves over and over again is, why don't they give up? Well, they don't give up because they don't give up.
75 years on, World War II still has this emotional resonance. Those who did not grow up in the shadow of it or who have not studied it, why is it important to understand this conflict to those who may not necessarily read about it on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think it is very important that all Americans, that all people in around the world actually, understand the significance and the legacy of World War II. I mean, first of all, in this country, we had 16.1 million in uniform. Now there are fewer than 400,000 still alive. So acknowledging their contribution and our debt to them is perpetually important. Not only the 400,000 Americans who died during the war, but all those who served and contributed in one way or another, in uniform or out of uniform. The importance of the war in our national conversation about racial and gender equality is difficult to overstate. We had 19 million women working outside the home during World War II. When the war ends, most of them end up going back to working in the home, but you're never going to keep that genie in the bottle forever. It opens up the world to women in a way that is really difficult to imagine without World War II. We know that women can do anything that men can do. We now know that women can be in frontline combat infantry units, just like men can. There are many blacks in this country who are fighting what they called a WWII campaign, victory over fascist aggressors overseas and victory against racism at home. And the civil rights movement is propelled by the contributions that Black Americans make to the war, hundreds of thousands of them serving in uniform, Tuskegee Airmen showing that they actually do have the capability to be excellent fighter pilots, Black soldiers surrendering their sergeant stripes after the Battle of the Bulge to serve as infantry privates in white units because the need for manpower, riflemen especially, is so intense. All of these things contribute to the civil rights movement, contribute to how we think about all Americans today. And then, of course, the contribution of the institutions that come out of the war, NATO, the United Nations, things that are critically important to keeping peace, stability, prosperity, for the most part, for the next 75 years. Those are vitally important, and to the extent that today they seem brittle, we should worry about that, because they were created out of a crying need for institutions that can hold the world together against all the centrifugal forces that will pull the world apart, including fascism. So kind of understanding these things and understanding that World War II is the genesis for these institutions and the world that we live in today is vitally important. It was a rock thrown into the middle of the pond. Many ripples come out from that splash, and we're still feeling the ripples today, and we will continue to feel those ripples for decades to come.
In 2003, you were embedded with the 101st Airborne Division in Iraq. Did you notice, or have you noticed, any commonalities between the soldiers of the greatest generation and those presently?
Yeah, I was with General Dave Petraeus through the whole catastrophe, as it turns out, right through Baghdad with the 101st Airborne. You know, for one thing, a rifleman is a rifleman is a rifleman, and there are aspects of infantry life that a soldier in 2003 in Iraq or a soldier in Afghanistan in 2020 would find very much in common with a soldier from Thucydides' time or in the Roman legions. There are things in common, whether it's dark humor or the camaraderie, the love that blooms on battlefields among soldiers. It's really quite unlike any other friendship, a deep, abiding sense of commitment to each other. And with respect to World War II, I mean, one of the things that you have to say about today's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, they're a lot more capable in many ways. They're better educated, they're more physically fit, they're better led than that World War II cohort. They're also much smaller. Instead of 16 million in uniform, you know, the Army is less than 500,000 now and shrinking. And yet the great grandsons and great granddaughters of those soldiers and sailors and airmen from World War II have a direct lineage. They've, you know, I find them when I'm together with them, whether it was in Iraq in 2003 or otherwise, that I really hear echoes in their mordant humor, in their cynicism, in their commitment to doing what they're doing under very difficult circumstances. And so it's very heartening. And there's something for us all to be proud of then, today, and tomorrow.
I like to end interviews kind of on a somewhat lighter note. You know, while there's nothing incredibly light about a global pandemic, kind of here's my quarantine question for you. If you had to be quarantined for a month, who would you rather be with, Patton or Monty? They're both very difficult personalities, I recognize.
I think I'd rather have coronavirus.
Yeah.
Well, Patton would be more entertaining, for sure. They're both very self-absorbed. You wouldn't get a word in edgewise. Montgomery really has some social deficits that would make it quite difficult, I think. Patton, of course, could be incredibly charming and was reasonably well-read and curious about the world. Generally, we see that in his diaries. He's got a literary turn of mind. So I think if I were forced to pick one of them and I couldn't substitute someone that I would rather be with, I would probably go with Pat.